Hey everybody, Tony D here with another video. This time, not a screenwriting video, but a video about comics. I'm going to try to do a video version of my column on Superfrat called Life Skills for Fanboys. That's my column about comics and everything surrounding it. The reason I'm doing this video is there was an interesting article Christian Baranek pointed out to me at ICV2. And, you know, with Christian and a lot of my comic friends, we've been talking about we've been watching the comic book industry collapse, not talking about it, but just kind of watching it collapse from the outside. You know, we're mostly out of it because we're in web comics, and, you know, I write for Bongo, but Bongo's gone on hiatus. I still have a few other comic projects in the works, but, you know, the mainstream of the industry in the world of comics has always been superheroes, Marvel and DC. They were the driving force behind comic book stores and what's called the direct market. If you don't know what that is, basically it is a separate market for comic book stores to buy comic books, and they're non-returnable. And in the past that was fine because comic book stores would take anything they didn't sell, they would slip them into bags and they'd put them in those big white boxes, and you'd sell them to collectors. And the reason people collected is because they followed the stories. And the problem now is kind of the same. You know, we've talked a lot about, you know, the politicalization of comic books. You know, the guy at Diversity in Comics and a lot of other people, Yellow Flash. There's a lot of other people on the internet talking about the politicalization of comic books, and that is certainly a factor. But really, that is a factor that came up because, you know, the industry's dying to begin with. If the industry was healthy, that probably wouldn't be an issue at all. The industry hasn't been healthy for a long time, and I've been saying for, gosh, probably 25 years, a lot of the problems that this article points out. It's written by Phil Boyle, who's a guest columnist, and he is a comic book retailer in the Southeast. He runs Coliseum Comics, which is a regional chain of comic book stores. I'm going to read his problems I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'm going to read his problems. He's got 8 problems here. I'm going to read them in backward order. Because I'd like to end with the most important ones. But so problem number 8, the promo items. Basically, Phil is saying why do major comic book publishers make comic book retailers pay for the promo items? Totally in 100% agreement with you, Phil. There's no way comic book stores should have to pay for promotional items that basically all they do is promote the comics. Even if you're giving out green, you know, little plastic Green Lantern rings or something like that, you should really give them to the stores. And yes, they're going to be collectible and fans want them and whatever, but, you know, you're talking about something that when you charge for, here's what actually happens. The retailers either get pissed off and eat the cost, which makes them resent you, or they turn around and charge for them, which makes a customer resent the retailer. I remember when we would have promotions in my store. I didn't own the store, but my boss, he wasn't paying for that stuff. No way. He turned around and he sold them. And he'd add money to it because, hey, you know, the stuff sits in the store, he had to move it, he had to pay a guy like me to sell it. You know, he doesn't want to lose any money. So, yeah, he's going to make a profit on it. That's just what happens. You think you're giving them a promo. You're not. Just give them the damn promo for free. Now, if they turn around and sell it, then it's on them. You know, everybody will know it's free. Everybody at other stores will give it out. You know, the guy who's so chintzy, he's going to sell a free promotional item to a customer. Give the stuff away. You're owned by major corporations. If you can't afford to do that, then something's wrong, in my view. Problem number 7. rushed and inconsistent scheduling. And this is something that retailers always complain about. It's a problem. There's really no excuse if you're Marvel or DC. Get your damn books out on time. You have all the money in the world. There shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, once in a while you have an issue and you got to throw up an inventory story, but that's really something that shouldn't happen. Even an Image, really. They're a pretty big company at this point. Most of their books, the running gag back in the 90s when they first launched was, is Image ever going to get its act together? They have a different business model. They deal with creators. Creators are in charge, and so creators sometimes they get behind. We get behind in stuff, and it just happens. Marvel and DC, you're punching a clock. That's a different business model. They've got things in place, and they should never, ever, ever be late. Problem number 6: books without a market. Yep. The real disconnect in the world of comic books is this. Comic book publishers make comics, they're ordered by the retailers, and then sold. But when comic book publishers look at their numbers, they just look at the numbers that were sold to the retailers. They don't know what was really bought by the fans. So I'll give you an example. In my store, my boss, for some reason, loved the comic book Thunderstrike, and he told me to order extra and push the book. And I told him, your customers don't really like that book. I mean, they know it exists. It's late in the game. They're probably going to cancel the book. Don't order extra. Oh, no. Order extra. On the flip side of that, I told him Hard Boiled was coming out. And Hard Boiled, man, a fantastic book. I believe it was Dave Gibbons and Frank Miller. I said, got to order number 1. It's a good book. Well, he ordered 50 copies, which was a lot for our store for a new book nobody heard of. And I said, why did you order so many? That's too many. And he was just like, well, it was a price break or whatever. For whatever reason, he ordered 50 copies. I'm like, okay, fine. I think we sold 12, which was okay, but that didn't justify the 50 he ordered. So the second issue came around, he didn't order any. I said, why didn't you order any? We sold 12 issues, at least order 12 of them. He said, well, the book was a failure, therefore I don't want any more in the store. I was like, so, I mean, that's the kind of stuff you're dealing with. You got to have books with a market, and if you're putting out books, look, we know who buys comic books. It tends to be guys. Yes, women like comic books, but those are few and far between. Superhero comics are a boys' thing. They just always have been. Yes, there are some girls who like boys' comics, just like there are boys who like girl stuff too, and girl comics. But, the sales tell you what people like to a degree, and what's, being reordered tells you what's selling in the stores, what people are reading. I mean, there are ways to gauge this stuff. You have to gauge it. Taking all the characters out of, a lot of the characters from the Marvel universe and just arbitrarily changing their gender and race and just, publishing the diversity rainbow isn't a strategy because, number one, it's not organic to the story. It's just not. It's a political agenda. And we all know it. So why are you doing it? You're perfectly capable of launching new comics with diverse characters. That's what they did in the old days. When you introduced a new character, you teamed him up with Spider-Man. Because Spider-Man was popular, people would check out the new guy, and then you could spin him off in his own series and see if he could sustain it. You don't replace the characters you have. They're your anchor books. They bring in the people. You take your trademark and you ruin it, and then you have nothing. So you gotta have books that have an audience, that have an appeal, something. And now it's just so politically driven. But again, that's not even the big problem. Here's one of the big problems: discounts for retailers. This is more of an inside baseball thing, but the problem is, and if we're talking about price points, the problem is books are $4 and $5. It's too much money. It's too much money for a comic. Bottom line, What is a 22-page comic, or 20? Really, it's 21-page comic. That's what you get in a story. What is that worth? What is it worth? It's worth $1, maybe. That's all it's worth. That book is too short. Back in the day when you got 32 pages, okay, that was worth $2-3. Now it's like 21 pages. What are you kidding me? $4, $5? That is not worth it. I don't care what cover you put on it. I don't care how good the art is or the story. It's not worth $4 or $5. It's just not. I can get so many. Do you know what I could buy at Target for $4 or $5? I could buy enough food for a week. You're gonna try to get me to buy a comic? This is supposed to be cheap entertainment. Okay? That is an outrageous price point for a 20-page comic. Get out of here with that. You gotta lower the price, okay? Lower the price to $1. That's one solution. And you gotta do it for all the comics. You can't just do it for one. They tried that with Spider-Man. They did the 99-cent Spider-Man. Everybody said, oh, it failed. No, it didn't fail. The problem was, the perception was, if you have a 99-cent comic and a bunch of regularly priced comics that are priced according to, you know, what the rest of the comics are going at, they see that as a cheap comic that no one wants to buy. And yes, retailers will be pissed at you for lowering the price, and you're going to have to do something about that. I don't know what you could do. Maybe give them like 50 free copies every week until their sales get up and cancel it out. But if comics were $1 a piece, people would buy 20 of them. Now, is that a real solution in this current marketplace? I don't think so. I think we're past that. That was the solution back in the 90s when I was crying about this and saying, oh my God, you're destroying the industry. They're too expensive. You're doing these crazy covers, blah, blah, blah. The only saving grace now would be is if you adopted the Japanese model. If you did big, thick, phone book sized comics on the cheapest paper imaginable so you can make it work. And, you know, instead of Marvel and DC putting out like 30 titles or 50 titles or whatever they put out every month, they just put out one a month with like 10 issues each. That would work. I mean, for 10 issues, say a price point of $9.95. I'd buy that. Sure. And that way you can do different things. Okay? If you get jammed up, you got plenty of stories, you just throw it in there. You can do continuing things, you can do one-shots or whatever. But you have flexibility with a book that big. And it doesn't go off the shelf that quickly, okay? That's a book that can be bought at any time because it's a read. You can read it. You could take a $9.95 10-issue comic, you could take it to the beach, you could leave it in your bathroom. There's lots you can do with that. A 20-page comic you read in 5 minutes and it's over. And you feel like you're wasted your money. It's the way it is. You got to adapt the Japanese model. The other part of the Japanese model is you do half your comic books or regular comics, superhero comics or whatever, and then you do a different imprint that's all porn, and that's where you make all your money. Problem 4, special covers from issue to issue. Obviously, they started this stuff back in the Death of Superman era when everybody was selling comics. Oh, but we got to charge more money for special covers now. It's ridiculous. The covers are dumb. They're dumb. They're dumb and they're not worth anything because it doesn't drive the story. Those covers don't mean anything. They're just fancy packaging. Okay? Yes, that's the only thing saving the industry now. Most of the guys who are buying it for collectible sake, they're just buying it because of these crazy covers you're spending money on. But that is a strategy with diminishing returns. Okay? It ends. It goes through cycles, and for a while it's cool. I mean, they've had every cover you could possibly think of. One of the guys mixed his DNA with the ink on the cover and put that in. And Kiss did that too. And they put their blood in the ink. And I mean, they've done every ridiculous possible thing you could possibly think of with covers. You can't put your stuff in covers. Covers don't. 5 years from now, those covers are worthless. I remember when Danger Girl was the hottest comic out there. Now where is it? No one's even heard of Danger Girl. I haven't seen Danger Girl. It's gone. I remember a guy, he was trying to convince a kid because he had a special Danger Girl cover. He's trying to convince the kid to pay $50 for the cover. $50 for Danger Girl. Would you pay $50 for Danger Girl now? Would you pay even $5? Come on. Danger Girl. Number 3, first issues, renumbering. And basically, these are all the same problems. So problem 3 is first issues. Problem 2 is reboots. And problem 1, 90% of the books coming off the stands at the end of their shelf life have zero value as a back issue. They're all the same problem. You can't keep renumbering these things. The whole point of reading superhero comics is to have this window into this universe that's constantly erupting and happening with all kinds of crazy stuff in it. Okay? If you keep renumbering it, if continuity doesn't matter, then what's the point? Why am I buying this stuff? I can go on the internet and get 500 issues of Batman, 1 through 500, for $50 from DC Comics right now. And that has Neil Adams' Batman in it. That's like the top shelf Batman. You can't get better than Neil Adams' Batman. I can go buy a digital download of the Fantastic Four done by Jack Kirby, the King. Why am I going to spend $5 on your current Fantastic Four book? Why? It doesn't make any sense. And you renumber it so Kirby's issues don't even matter? What's the point? You don't have guys in your stable. There's almost no guys in your stable who can compare to Kirby or Neil Adams. So what are you doing? I mean, unless you're going to let these guys, unless you've got real talent. And think on this for a minute. Back in the 90s, when comic books were selling in the hundreds of thousands, not even at their peak, but that was the last big peak during the boom. You had guys like Chris Claremont doing the writing of the X-Men, Jim Lee's drawing it, you got Todd McFarlane on Spider-Man, and I'll be the first to admit, Todd McFarlane, I like his art. I'm not crazy about it, but I like it. I like this Spider-Man art. I don't think he's necessarily a good writer, but I think he's got good ideas, right? So if you team him up with a good writer who can execute those ideas well, when Todd was on the book, they did this great last issue of Venom, where Peter Parker fakes his own death and leaves Eddie Brock and Venom on an island, convinced that they finally killed Spider-Man and they're finally content. That was a great issue. It was a fun issue. It gave you some closure on a character. It had good stakes. That was a fun issue. Now, I don't know who came up, I don't know who wrote it. Maybe Todd even wrote it, I don't remember. Maybe he had some help. Maybe he had some editors help him, I don't know. But, and even Spawn, Spawn is not, the issues that Todd, some of the issues are great because he brought in guest writers, which was a great move. I wish they would do that more, some of these big guys. Later on, even some of his crazy ideas, at least they were cool and interesting and new. And why did they leave Marvel Comics? Why? Basically, it all comes down to money, right? When you're making millions of dollars, I mean, Todd was like the highest paid Spider-Man guy. And I remember those days. And the rumor was that Marvel complained about it. Oh, we don't want to pay these guys all this money. Corporate guys, they don't want to, they're always looking away to save money. You save money on the talent, you get what you deserve. You get what you deserve. I mean, you would kill for the numbers Todd used to do. You would kill for them. Those numbers were in the millions. You ain't doing the millions now. I mean, look at the numbers. They're bad. Guys, compared to the early 90s, what are you kidding me? Death of Superman, millions. Spawn #1, millions. X-Men #1, millions. Now, thousands. It's because there's nothing there. There's not enough story there. You need to pay these guys. You need to give them a vested interest in the property. You need good royalties. You need big paydays, and then you'll attract the talent you want. You'll attract these big names. Those guys at Image will come back to do a run. Why not? But there needs to be a continuity. Without the continuity, who cares? There's a million copies of Batman floating around. There's a million copies of Spider-Man floating around. All you do is find a good one at a comic book convention for a quarter. You're going to charge me $4 or $5 for some new thing that you're going to build up and promise me all this stuff and not deliver? You've not delivered too many times. You're killing your own market. I mean, forget about the politics, although that's not good either. Everybody on YouTube is crushing you in that area. But, you know, if you want to make good comics, you got to pay people. You got to have a real continuity with real editors. You can't have these guys who are punching a clock, half paying attention, like some of the editors you've had in the past. Believe me, I know some of these guys. Marvel Comics was going through editors faster than I could collect the damn business cards. I would get a business card from a guy, say, oh, I got to send you some pictures. Oh, yeah. Shoot me an email, send me some pictures. I'd work on pictures for maybe a week, send the email. He'd already be gone. So what is it? You know, you can't just keep burning through people like that. You've got to open up the doors. And now the doors are slammed for guys like me. Unless I have an in, unless I know an editor, unless those editors ask me. But those editors have been so incestuous for so many years in the comic book industry. Now they have this weird political agenda. But back in the day, you know, Mark Waid does a decent job at writing. I like some of his books, but he's a very inside baseball kind of guy when it comes to comics. You know, the guy is steeped in those legends that he read when he was a kid. And to some degree, yes, you need that, but you also need new blood. You need new people to come in and really inject with some new ideas. Those Image guys were a huge loss for Marvel Comics. You should have kept them. You should have kept them and paid them whatever they wanted because you would have made the money. You should have let them make their characters at Marvel Comics. Who cares if they get a stake in it? If they get a stake in it, you'll still own enough of the characters to make money. The rules have changed. Creators don't need you anymore. If they get that audience, they're gone. Okay? But if you treat them nice, if you keep them happy, you pay them a decent wage, they're going to leave you anyway. That's the reality of comics. Look, it took me a long time to figure that out as a publisher and a writer. Comic book artists leave you. So when you sign a contract with them, you figure out how they're going to leave. That's what you're doing. You know, you're also figuring out what you pay and what you can pay down the road, but you can word your contract in a way that's not draconian, but that also benefits you and benefits them. You say, look, you stay here, you do the work, you get paid. And we'd like you to stay as long as you can. You want to be invested in your character? Here's some financial incentives. You base it on sales. Even that, some of the big two took away. I know a creator who's a big name writer on one of the big name books. He was making $80,000 an issue. $80,000. But they didn't like that he made that kind of money. They didn't like paying him that, even though he had the sales. Who cares? As long as you're making money, it should be fine. As long as the company's making money. And this whole idea, okay, now the book's making, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, let's hire a bunch of cheap guys to now do the book. That kills the sales of the book. It's happened a million times in comics. And if you look back at Chris Claremont and his run on the X-Men for almost 20 years, he wrote the X-Men. Do you know how valuable those X-Men comics were to the comic book stores in the 80s? This is how valuable they were. If you weren't reading Claremont, the X-Men would come in. The store would put them on the shelf for a couple of weeks, however many weeks they felt the new comics could stay out. As soon as they could, they'd take those comics off the shelf, they'd stick them in bags, and they'd increase the cover price by $1. Now this was in the 80s when comics were mostly $2, $3. So going from $2 to $3, that's a price jump. And guess what? those 3 or 4 extra issues you ordered, they would sell. A couple of them, at least 1 or 2 of them would sell, because somebody would miss their issue of X-Men and come into the store and go, oh, I'm willing to pay an extra buck. And guess what? After a month, they'd add another $1 to it, effectively doubling the price. And eventually it would creep up to at least $5. When I was running a store back in that period, I was in the early 90s, but I used to go into that store too. I would look at the back issues of X-Men, and after a few months, it was just $5 books. $5. And people had no problem paying that. For a $2 book, $5. That's the kind of price point retailers could expect on a Claremont X-Men, because people wanted to read the story, and they wanted to read every single issue because he was that good, he had been on it that long, and the consistency, the continuity was good. Now what does it matter? What does it matter? What does Kevin Smith's run on Daredevil matter? They've renumbered it a bunch of times. What will Mark Waid's run on Daredevil matter when they renumber it for the umpteenth time? It won't matter. It doesn't mean anything. If you don't make meaningful changes and keep them, if you just keep doing versions of versions of versions of versions, they don't mean anything, and they don't mean anything to your customers. You want to develop a long-term base with your customers if you're interested in publishing. The other major problem with the comic book industry, and this is something a lot of fans can't face, but it's true, comic books are the least important part of the industry. You know, now that they're making the movies, now that they're making, I mean, before it was just video games, maybe a cartoon or shirts or whatever, all that stuff. All that stuff's more important to them than the actual comic, in my view. It shows in their work. You know, they're making millions and millions of dollars on t-shirts and everything else. Meanwhile, they're arguing, you know, with their talent. There should be no arguing. Their talent, they should be hiring top-notch talent to make sure their trademarks are treated with the utmost, I don't know what you call it, the utmost creative sincerity? You know? And if you're not going to do that, if you're going to just throw caution in the wind, well, then don't be surprised when people go, what do I need this shirt for? I don't read this comic. What do I want to go see this movie for? I never heard of this character. What do I want to play a video game for? I hate this character. I used to read that character. Now I can't stand them. That's what you're turning it into. All right. Sorry I ranted. But I'm very passionate about the comic book industry. I'd like to see it succeed. But until there is a major change, you know, Phil, God bless you. I'm glad you run a comic book store, but man, I hope things turn around. But right now, I don't see it. I think part of the problem is the comics have moved to LA, and now they're more of a division of just a movie company than ever. I think moving the comic books to LA probably did more hurt than it did positivity to them. I don't foresee, I mean, if you look at what's going on with Marvel Comics in terms of their creative talent, you know, it's too much. It's just too much. They're coming at the comics in a completely different way, and not in a good way. Not in a good way, because there was a tone, and there was a reason why New York City guys made great comics. First off, most of the comics take place in New York City, so there's that. But you know, out in LA, there's too much. I don't know how to describe it. It's like there's too much desperation out there, and comics, you know, it's a low money thing. So when you got desperate people trying to write, I know when I'm broke, you know, as a freelancer, and I'm desperate, it's really hard to write. It's really hard to concentrate. You know, it's just like, oh, take any of my ideas. Just pay me, just pay me, just pay me. You know, you don't want that kind of desperation in the comic, and that's to me LA. That's the vibe of LA. New York is different. New York, you got to get stuff done because that's New York, and you either get stuff done or you move to Jersey. So, let me just wrap this up. Marvel and DC. I could fix your problems. Most guys, most creators in my era could fix your problems. You are caught up in the corporate stuff and in, right now, the political stuff. That is alienating your fan base. Your fan base is the most important thing. Until you bring them back, you are just counting the days until that entire comic book division closes and you just become a licensing arm of Warner Brothers or Disney. And that's what's going to happen, fanboys, unfortunately. I've predicted this for a long time. I think Marvel Comics is just going to fold shop, and IDW is going to be the guys probably publishing your comics for a while until they, until someone else comes along and wants to pay the licensing fee. It's a win-win for the big corporation, so it's no risk to them. They don't need the headache of having an office and talent and all those things. Let IDW take that risk, and if they go bankrupt, who cares? You'll still make money. And I think that's the way it's headed. That's probably the way it's headed at Warner Brothers too, albeit much more slowly. When they're done with these movies, comic books are done. So, in the meantime, go to my website, the Webcomic Factory and Superfrat, because webcomics will live forever. I'm Tony D, and this has been my rant. See ya.